What is up, guys? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper video. Today we're going to take a look at how to target, beat, and understand one of the most popular decks right now on MTGO. It is putting up results on challenges, and it's something you're going to see in your leagues. So I want to put out this video in hopes that you will be prepared to face Familiars, a really powerful blue-white combo deck focused on Ghostly Flicker, Archaeomancer, and Sunscape Familiar. So let's dive right into the deck tech, and we can start talking about it. Alright guys, we're going to be taking a look at Senpai Blank's 4th place finish in the Pauper Challenge this weekend. We're going to be taking a look at their Familiars deck. Now this list does vary a little bit between paper and online play for clock considerations. Infinite life on MTGO is not a win condition because of the timer, but in paper it's often good enough. So there will be some key differences between playing this deck in paper and playing this deck on MTGO. Let's dive right into the deck tech though. For the lands, you've got some Ash Barrens for consistency here. This deck runs a full 4 of them. Azorius Chancery, which is another huge part of the deck due to Snap having several lines towards generating mana. The dual lands are very important here. A whole bunch of basic islands, as well as a single Mortuary Mire. This prevents you from decking at the end of the combo if you do take them to deck. Obscure Storefront is just a small fetch land that gets you the land that you want while also gaining you life, which is good right now, specifically against Burn. It's just a slightly better Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds, and then 2 planes. In the past, there was a version of this deck running a Singleton Swamp to allow for some copies of Snuff Out in the main. With the rise of Burn again, and the really dominant performance with most of the red decks, that version has fallen by the wayside, but it is still around, so keep an eye out. If you see a swamp, know to expect Snuff Outs coming from that deck. Starting off with our 1-drops here, we have a pair of Ephemerates. These are going to be just another value-oriented or value-generating card to combo with Archaeomancer, Seagate Oracle, Muldrifter. Really, the deck does focus around ETB effects and flickering for value. Godpharaoh's Faithful, this is one of the key components to the Infinite Life combo. It's a 0/4 for 1 white, and whenever you cast a blue, black, or red spell, you gain 1 life. Very good blocker, but generating Infinite Life is really what it's here for. Next, we have a couple of Preordains. A full set of 4 here. This is really just to smooth out your draws and allow you to find the pieces you're looking for more consistently. Because of how this combo operates, you do need 2 copies of the 4 Sunscape Familiars in play to generate your Infinite Flicker and Infinite Life. So the deck is definitely a little bit draw dependent, and you need a lot of draw manipulation or top deck manipulation in the form of Scry, Seagate Oracle, Modern Age, Muldrifter, Deep Analysis, things like that, to really make sure that you're going to hit your combo consistently. Deck runs a couple of Prohibits and Remove Souls. These are flex slots, so you will see varying counter spells in these spots. Prohibit seems to be the preferred 2 of here, but some decks are running Spell Pierce, some decks are running Dispel. It really depends what you're going to see in this Remove Soul slot, so keep an eye out. That won't always be the case. Next up is a 4 for Snap. This card really is just the premier blue removal of the set, and combining that with the bounce lands for a mana base, you do have ways of generating positive mana output, especially when considering Snap will often just cost 1 blue mana. So keep an eye out. There will be several lines that you have available to you to generate mana, and your opponent will be able to generate a lot of mana from just a single blue. Even a single blue up does not mean that they are out of counterspells, so really keep an eye on that. Next, we have Modern Age. This is really just a staple of blue at the moment. It's a 2/3 flyer when you need it to be, or it's some loots when you don't. It has several modes that are all relevant here. You're going to loot twice, and then you're going to make a flyer. The flyer is a good blocker. It's a 2/3 in the air. And looting twice really does help this deck do what it wants to do, especially when combined with Archaeomancer. A lot of your discards are not dead cards to you, so be aware that that really is just helping them draw deeper while also presenting some blockers. Ghostly Flicker is the main component of the combo. They are running 2 copies of it. Some decks are running 3. Some decks are greedy enough to just run 1. Be aware that this is the key card to resolving the combo. Sage's Road Denizen. This is a card that in general is only run on MTGO. Although some lists are starting to run Cyber Cryptologist in this slot, just because it does act as a similar win condition. In general, this win condition is only viable in the Prosperous Pirates version of the deck that generates infinite mana off of the combo as well. So be advised, you're not always going to see this. The Sage's Road Denizen is just there to deck out your opponent once you go infinite, and it is a win on the spot card as opposed to just winning through infinite life in paper. Oftentimes paper versions won't even play this card, but you can and will see this in MTGO variants of this deck. Seagate Oracle is just another one of your blockers plus draw spell combinations, similar to the role of the Modern Age and Mole Drifter. This card is really just here to block stuff as well as replace itself and keep drawing you deeper. Deep Analysis, this is a single card. This is a flex slot as well as the Remove Soul. A lot of players are running Meeting of Minds in this deck from the new set March of Machines as a free draw 2 at instant speed. Some of the more devoted Familiars players are sticking with the Deep Analysis route, really up in the air as to which one is going to rise to the top as the best version of this 4-mana draw spell. I personally am in the camp of Meeting of Minds, but there are several Familiars players that are sticking with Deep Analysis, so be prepared to fight either there. And then you have 3 of Archaeomancer. This is the last piece of the combo and really is the linchpin of the deck. ETB, get something back from your graveyard, either an instant or sorcery. You're almost always going to be targeting Ephemerate or Ghostly Flicker. And I'll go ahead and demonstrate the combo here in just a moment, but we'll get through the deck tech first. Ultimately, what's going to happen is your opponent is going to assemble some number of Sunscape Familiars out, an Archaeomancer, and a Basic Island, and they're going to flicker the Basic Island and the Archaeomancer. What that's going to do is the Archaeomancer is going to come back into play. The Ghostly Flicker will have resolved and be in the graveyard, so Archaeomancer is going to return Ghostly Flicker back from your graveyard to your hand, and then the island will also enter play untapped, which allows you to play the Ghostly Flicker again for 1 mana as long as you have 2 Sunscape Familiars out. This generates infinite Storm, as well as infinite blue spell casts, which is how you get your mill from Sage's Road Denizen, as well as your infinite life from God Pharaoh's Faithful. In the event that you are running the Prosperous Pirates variant, you can flicker Prosperous Pirates instead of the Singleton Island, which generates 2 treasures when it enters the battlefield, which means that you have a treasure to cast the Ghostly Flicker again, and another treasure to bank for infinite mana going into the later parts of the game, or the going into the deeper parts of the combo. Oftentimes, that variant will run Cyber Cryptologist, which works as an anti-kill spell for your Sunscape Familiar, but also, once you generate infinite mana and you have infinite casts of Ghostly Flicker, you can combo it to generate infinite +1/+1 counters in order to win the game on the spot through any creature that can attack. There are a lot of variations of this deck that you're going to play, but just know that the Archaeomancer, Ghostly Flicker, and 2 Sunscape Familiars is the primary combo. There are several lines, like I mentioned before, using Snap and your bounce lands to untap to generate mana, but at the end of the day, they are not going to go infinite. Ghostly Flicker is how the deck goes infinite, so just be on the lookout for that. The last card in the deck is Mole Drifter. It's a simple 4-of. A lot of the times, this is the best draw spell in your deck. You're going to evoke this for 2 sometimes, and just go ahead and flicker it for an Ephemerate. Draw 4 cards for 3 mana. Draw 4 cards for 3 mana. It really is one of the most on-rate and efficient draw combos in the format at the moment. It's going to draw you really, really deep, and you're going to continue to abuse this ETB ability combined with Archaeomancer, Ephemerate, and Ghostly Flicker to generate a lot of value for yourself to dig towards your combo pieces. Out of the sideboard, there are a lot of cards in the sideboard that do flex and change constantly. Right now we have a pair of Last Breaths. This is here as really your only hard removal choice. You bring this in if you absolutely need to. It gets the controller for life. Generally speaking, that's not going to be relevant for you because you're a combo deck. But it is an answer to like Mer Retriever out of the Combotron deck. If for some reason you can stop them from getting an Ashnod's Altar on the board and exile some, it does help that way. It is important to know that this is an exile effect, which does have some merit in a lot of the decks in the format, but it is power 2 or less, so there's not a ton of targets. This is very selective. Revoke Existence, it's pretty obvious what this is here for. This is here to double up against Affinity as well as Boggles. Realistically, you're going to bring this more in against Affinity than you are against Boggles because Infinite Life is pretty good against that deck, but it does help in slowing them down a little bit if you need to. Combine that with Holy Light, which is another very good singleton card coming out of the deck. Coming out of the sideboard, it is an instant that gives all non-white creatures -1/-1. Obviously, this isn't against Kuldotha Red, but this is also in against Boggles and other similar decks that are assembling a pretty wide board of 1/1. Ultimately, this isn't against Kuldotha Red and Boggles, but there is some other value against things like the Boros deck and anything running like Voldaren Epicures, stuff like that. So keep an eye on places to bring this in or play around if you're playing against the deck. 3 Dust to Dust. Sometimes this deck goes up to 4 Dust to Dust. It really just depends on how heavy Affinity is in the meta. This combined with the Revoke Existences will oftentimes give you a lot of options against Affinity. Combine that with Archaeomancer to get Dust to Dust back. You can really, really hit them pretty hard. But it is still a very strong deck and a very good matchup. So be aware that they will have this hate coming in against you if you're playing Affinity into this deck. You have a second copy of Remove Soul coming in to match the singleton in the main board. This is really just for when your prohibits are dead. You want to be able to bring in different removal spells. So you're bringing in Remove Soul and negates when the prohibits are not doing the job. And then a full set of Hydroblast. This is also against the red deck. Obviously, a 0/4 that gains you life is going to be good against the red deck. However, oftentimes they are able to outpace you. So you really just want this as an insurance policy against the red deck to give you enough time to gain life and be out of range of them. When playing against this deck, what are the key points of interaction that you are looking for? Well, there are several. So when the deck is comboing out, it needs 2 Sunscape Familiars in order to generate the infinite casts. If at any point you can kill a Sunscape Familiar in response to Sunscape Familiar entering the battlefield, that will be the best option for you to keep the deck from comboing. Now, because it has things like Snaps, which allows it to bounce and then replay its Sunscape Familiar for free, you have to be very careful when you are choosing to kill Sunscape Familiar against this deck. Obviously, with things like Ghostly Flicker, Ephemerate, and all of the options running Cryptologist and Prohibits, picking your spot for removing Sunscape Familiar can often be very difficult. So the other key point of interaction here is the Ghostly Flicker resolution. Ghostly Flicker is going to attempt to target an island and the Archaeomancer. If you can remove Archaeomancer in response, the Ghostly Flicker will not resolve before the Archaeomancer enters play again if they ephemerate it. That means that they will not be able to get that Ghostly Flicker back with that Archaeomancer, and the Ghostly Flicker will then resolve to just flicker the island. So keep in mind there are some points in which you can disrupt the combo while Ghostly Flicker is on the stack. The last and probably easiest way to interact with this deck is when Archaeomancer's trigger is on the stack. When the Archaeomancer enters the battlefield and it targets the Ghostly Flicker to return it from the graveyard to their hand to continue the combo, that is your best option to interact with the combo. Oftentimes they have committed mana to the board to cast the Archaeomancer to start the combo, so generally speaking, if you're going to fight them on something, it's going to be through the graveyard. Cards like Fairy Macabre are very good in this matchup because you can play it for free from hand and it's uncounterable. targeting their 2 Ghostly Flickers can really put a dent in this deck strategy if you can get both in the graveyard at the same time. Otherwise, using things like Relic of Progenitus, flickering a Dawnbringer Cleric to target the Ghostly Flicker, anything that's going to take that out of the graveyard away from them so that they cannot continue the loop is going to be just fine in this matchup and is going to be really, really helpful in terms of stalling them out because they will have to play around those effects. Cards, obviously, to bring in, like Relic of Progenitus, Fairy Macabre, Nihil Spellbomb, all of these things are going to be very, very powerful against this deck and stall it out while it attempts to put together multiple instant speed responses. Again, to be very clear, it does have points of interaction in which it can save its thing from the graveyard. So, for example, if you wait for the Archaeomancer to flicker, its ability to go on the stack, it targets the Ghostly Flicker to bring that back, and you go to remove the Ghostly Flicker from the graveyard. If at that point they have a way to ephemerate or the second Ghostly Flicker to target their Archaeomancer, they will be able to get that back. Specifically ephemerate in this situation, because they have the other Ghostly Flicker, it's just going to loop at instant speed anyway. But there are several redundancies in this deck that you need to be aware of. You know, you have to be sure you're getting rid of both Ghostly Flickers if you want to 100% shut down the combo. You need to be aware that Ephemerates at any given moment will be able to salvage things from the graveyard. So keeping the graveyard limited, especially with an early Relic of Progenitus, is going to be a great way for you to really control the pace of the match and the combo against this deck and limit their options in terms of doing things at instant speed. If you are, for example, able to tap a Relic to make them discard or to make them exile that Ghostly Flicker, and then they go to return it at instant speed, you are then able to pop the Relic to exile it again in response. So you really want to have something else in the tank sometimes against this deck. You have to pick your spots very carefully. Lastly, as I said, 2 Sunscape Familiars is the requirement for this combo, so if you can keep them off of 2 Sunscape Familiars, that's obviously going to do a good way. That's going to do a lot of heavy lifting to keep the combo away from them. Last thing to know, the deck is very, very vulnerable to land destruction because oftentimes it's operating off of snaps to generate mana positively from the bounce lands. And because it is a very mana-hungry deck, even with the discounts from Sunscape Familiar, Land Disruption is hugely successful against this deck. This deck's worst matchup is widely considered to be Ponza, so be aware that blowing up one of those bounce lands on turn 2 often just outright wins the match, but in the versions that it doesn't win the match on the spot, it puts them in a very, very bad position that they then have to draw out of. So in terms of targeting this deck, if you're really concerned about running into familiars, consider playing red-green Ponza into your league. Mono red can outpace this. Affinity can out aggro this. But in general, you want to target their graveyard or their land base if you really want to shut the deck down from performing. So hopefully, guys, that lets you understand how the combo works, where the key pieces of interaction are, and some of the matchups that you might want to try or key cards that you might want to make sure that you have ready in the sideboard waiting for this deck if you run into it in your leagues. I hope very much that this was of some value to you and that you understand the deck a little bit better now. As usual, guys, share this with a Pauper player. It really does help the channel grow. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all the things to the algorithm. And I will see you guys next week. As usual, goodbye forever. Unless I see you next time. Peace out.